Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel. This one's a little bit overdue, I would say, but it's about time I sat down and took you through my top 10 favourite books I read in 2024. So I think I had a pretty good reading year in 2024, but I've been putting this video off for a couple of reasons. One, I've just not really felt like sitting in front of a camera, so I do apologise for that. But two, if I kept putting this video off, it meant that I did not have to sit down, go through my list and try to figure out which 10 books in which order I would put in my top 10. But I've done that now. I'm here for you to go through my 10 favourite books that I read in 2024. So I did have no honourable mentions for this list. I didn't want to go through too many books and make it harder on myself trying to compile this list, but also I've gone with my usual kind of rule when I do these lists, and that means that there are no duplicate titles, so only one book per series. So in reverse order, let me take you through my 10 favourite books of last year. So in 10th position, this one was a bit of a surprise for me. There are a couple of those in this list. It is Keiko Book 1 by Mike Brooks. This one was called Dark Run. I just had a really good time with it. I really liked some of the character work that we had in here. I like a heist fantasy, and this is kind of in many ways a reverse heist sci-fi, so a little bit different, but I really liked how it all worked out. There's some really good concepts of world building in here, and as I say, I just really liked some of the characters. There are some cool sassy characters, which is kind of a trope that I really enjoy as well, and I think one in particular in here was done really well. It's a series that I'm going to hopefully continue to enjoy in 2025, as I've got book 2 on my reading plan for this year, and yeah, hopefully I'll enjoy it enough to move into book 3 soon after and finish off the trilogy. I do like a bit of sci-fi. I have been growing my my kind of repertoire, my experience of sci-fi over the last few years, and this is not going to be the last sci-fi title that you'll see in this list. In 9th position, I've got one of I think it actually might have been the first book that I read in 2024, or the first book that I completed. This one is Starlight Jewel, book 1 of Gifts of the Old Tree by E.L. Lyons. And again, this one has just got some really awesome world building in it. I loved the different powers, the different gifts basically that our characters, or some of our characters, have in here, but there's one which really stands out and kind of makes the story essentially, and that is the gift of effacing, where memories can be stripped out of someone's head basically. It makes for some really good storytelling and some good character building between both characters who have been effaced, who've had their memories stripped, and also those around them, and leads to some kind of good questions and good scenarios about what happens when you do have a gap in your memory basically. You don't know somebody, they know you, but you don't know why, you don't know whether to trust them, and so forth. I really enjoyed the story in here. There's a hint of romance in it as well, but it's not the main part of the overall plot, and that's contributed to a rework of the cover of this particular book. So the one that I'll display is the current cover, rather than the one that was on the book when I read it. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next book in the series and to seeing where we go from here. Book number 8 on my list is one that's got kind of similar vibes. It's a science fiction title, but again it's got hints of romance in it. This one is Umbra, Sentient Stars book 1 by Amber Toro. I just had a great time with it. It was a fantastic adventure. It was a little bit maybe up and down just at the start, where I wasn't quite sure what kind of timeline we were in as we jumped around a little bit, just setting things up. But once the story kicked in, I had a great time with it. We've got 3 kind of competing points of view in this story. We've got 3 different characters who all have similar backgrounds, so that's quite unusual in itself. I find they're not too different in kind of the character base themselves, but it's handled really well. They're very well written. They each have their own character voice, and there's no kind of possibility of confusing them, especially the 2 female characters. There's no possibility really of confusing them as you'll read in the story, so that was really well handled. I loved the adventure, I loved the exploration, I loved some of the science in here, the technology that you've got with these kind of living ships, almost these sentient ships that some of our characters have, and the way that they become characters in their own right as well. The romance in here was pretty good as well. It's not kind of the key aspect of the storyline for me. If you're looking for a romance book, then perhaps you would take more of that aspect from it, whereas me, I'm looking for the sci-fi adventure, and that's definitely what I got here, and it's another one that I can't wait to continue the series with. In seventh, this one's maybe a little bit unusual for me just in terms of which book I've chosen, but I've gone with Queen of Storms, which is book 2 of the Firemane saga by Raymond D. Feist. I had a great time with this trilogy. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my, I guess, highlights of the year because I'm a Feist fan. I've read all of his Riftwall saga, and I really had a great time with that overall. So it was good for me getting back into this author's writing. Book 2 of the series is the one that I think stands out for me and what I look for in a book the most. Normally I would tend to go for book 3 in a series, which is why I said it was a bit unusual for me. But I just think that the kind of the improvement in the story after you had all of the setup of book 1, I just think it was really good and really well handled in this second book. There are some great battles, some great character progression as you move from book 1 and set up the events of book 3. But overall, I just think it was a really good story and a really good setting, and I loved the series. But it was book 2 that was my favourite of the 3. In 6th position, just outside the top 5, because that's how numbers work, it's Titan Child by Jen Williams. This is book 2, the final book of the Talon duology. I loved this duology. I just thought it was so creative. There's so much weird and wonderful stuff going on, and probably more of that in this second book than in the first, because you've got all of the setup out of the way. You're already introduced to the world, and we're just in the continuation and the big climactic battle at the end of it, of course, as you often will get in the final book of an epic fantasy. I really liked the characters that you had in here. Some of them were just really well done. I loved the different elements that you got with the Titan ore, basically, which some people have grafted into their skin to give them special powers. That's not the highlight of this book as much as it was in the first one. This one's more about some of the kind of the weird and wonderful aspects of it, with the Green Man taking centre stage, and he's a character from English-British folklore, and it's one that always kind of makes me feel a little bit weird as I'm reading him if it's kind of well written, and here it was definitely well written. I love this world, even though I don't like the kind of the world map and some of the naming conventions of this world, because it is too much like our actual world. The map looks like Britain and Northern Europe. That doesn't do it for me, but you can excuse that, you can forget about it as you're reading it, because the world in the writing is just so well done. It's a series that I definitely recommend. It's short as well, being a duology, so now that it's finished, there's no better time to pick it up. So number 5 on my list is another final book in a fantasy series. This one is The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, book 3 of the Bloodsworn saga. Again, I had a fantastic time with this series. John Gwynne is one of my favourite authors, if not actually my number 1 favourite, and I love pretty much everything that he writes. I love the battles that he writes, I love the characters, the animal companions that he has. In some of those aspects, I do think he is pretty much without compare in fantasy today, and that is a really bold claim to make, of course, but I really do think he stands up to it. This series was very different for me. It's maybe quite heavy, it's maybe quite difficult to get into depending on, I guess, your experience with fantasy, and particularly kind of Norse-inspired fantasy and other fantasies where you have a lot of the language coming into it, a lot of linguistic elements too, especially here the magic. That can be quite tough reading depending on how used to it you are, and how you actually literally read a book, I guess. But here I didn't think it was detracting from the writing, and obviously that shows, because it's in my top 5 of the books that I read last year. I love the story. Again, it's got some great characters, some absolutely fantastic battles. There are a few little letdowns in the battles for me, but again, nothing too major, nothing that detracts from my overall enjoyment of the book as a whole. So yeah, number 5 in this list this year for one of John Gwynne's epics. Talking of Norse-inspired fantasies, I've got another one coming up in 4th position in my list. This one is Hall of Bones. It's by Tim Hardy and it's book 1 of the Brotherhood of the Eagle. This was a real surprise for me. I remember reading the opening chapter when this was a finalist in SPF BO7, I think it was, so a couple of years ago now. And I didn't really get on with it. I liked it, but it didn't suck me in. It didn't really, I guess, do its job of making me want to turn the page and start chapter 2 immediately. If I was reading it as a book, that would be another situation. But as I was only reading chapter 1 at the time, it wasn't the best that I read from that batch of 10 SPFBO finalists. By the time I finally picked it up a few months ago, though, I read through it and I really had a fantastic time with it. Again, it's got some great characters, some great setting. I loved the story that you had in here, though, as well, and how, I guess, different it was from just that opening chapter. It's kind of a, we're looking at one particular scene in this character's life, and then we go back and we relive his life, essentially, and all of the different things that happened to put him in that initial situation. And then you get to a certain position in the book, a certain part of the book, and then you move on from there, and everything you experience is new. I love some of the betrayals that you get in here. I thought they were really, really well done. Everything was well written. The battles, the settings, the all the descriptions that you had there of this really cool world, I just thought was really well done. So it's another one that I'm really excited to continue the series of. It's on my list for 2025 to get to book 2, but I'm hoping to move on to 3 and the recently released final book in the series as well. So then we move into my top 3 favourite books of 2024, and kicking off that top 3 is the Malevolent 7, book 1 of a series, I believe, of the same name by Sebastian de Castell. Now I say I believe in there because I've not found anything 100% guaranteeing that it is the opening book in a series, but I have seen some little inklings that say it has got the series of the same title. I just had a great time with it. I love the magic that we've got in here, and the narration as well, bearing in mind especially that I listened to this on audiobook. The narration was fantastic because the main character, who this is a first person story, so the character is essentially our narrator. He's got a sense of humour and an overall tone that really resonates with me. It's something that works well for me if it is done well. It was definitely done well here, both in the writing and in the narration, because the audiobook narrator was, I think, perfect for the role. He really, really did a fantastic job with it. Again, it's one that's got some great magic in here, and I really liked actually how you got descriptions of the magic. You really know how the magic works in here, or at least the magic that our main character has, because he describes intricate little movements, intricate little actions that he takes to activate his magic and set it to work. And it doesn't actually detract from the actual book itself. So we'd have a battle scene, for instance, in chapter 1 of the book, there's a big battle, and he's going through drawing sigils on his chest, or tracing sigils that are already there, telling us exactly what he's doing, how he's going to target, who he's going to target, how it's going to work and everything. And it takes quite a bit of time to go through that. But all this time that we're having this great battle and we've got this detailed description of magic going on, it all fits really, really well. So many times authors can do exactly that, and you'll be bored because the action's happening around you and you're just focusing on something which doesn't seem too important. Here it was not a problem whatsoever. It worked really, really well for me. I liked the progression of the story as well. It's one that we've heard before. It's the Magnificent Seven or the Seven Samurai kind of tale, but it's put into a fantasy, a magic-based fantasy kind of slant here. And I really enjoy the different types of magic that you've got in here as well, with all of these different wonderists, they're called. You've got a death mage or a blood mage, you've got a rat mage, a thunder mage, and it's just really cool. And I like how you're kind of picking a crew basically with all of these different talents depending on how you think, or based on how you think they'll be able to help you accomplish this end goal. So yeah, it was a really fantastic story. I liked all of the group that they got together, including the kind of the bad characters that you've got in there as well. But the narration was the thing that made it for me, especially with a, shall we say, foul-mouthed main character and an audiobook narrator who did a great job with that. So with The Greatcoats as one of my favourite series, I've really enjoyed Sebastian de Castell's work so far, and The Malevolent Seven is another tick in that particular list. Number 2 on my list, and we're back to sci-fi. So I'm a big fantasy fan, but I've had a few sci-fi titles in my top 10 for the last couple of years, and this time, yeah, number 2 in my list. So this one, it's a bit much to say it blew me away. I don't go into that sort of hyperbole, but I was so surprised by this book. It just came out of nowhere for me. It's Last Man Standing, book 1 of the Earthburst saga by Craig A. Falconer. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed this particular book, because it was just a freebie on Audible. I downloaded it, listened to it because I had a bit of time remaining, not really expecting much, and I enjoyed it so much. One of my favourite books of, I can't remember when I read it, even 2022 or 2023, was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and this one has so many of those similar vibes, and key for me is it's the kind of parts of Project Hail Mary that I really enjoyed. That's kind of what we had here. So it's a very different story. It's not a copycat tale in any sense, but you do have a kind of a soul survivor, as the title suggests. This time he's on a space station. He's trying to either get to Earth or to save Earth from an impending disaster, basically. He's not supposed to be the last man standing, though. He's not the person you would choose to be in this position, and he certainly wouldn't choose to be in this position. But I really enjoyed listening to all of the different things that happened to him and the way that he went about this task that he'd set himself. You've got to follow certain steps to get there, because things are going wrong and need putting right before you can move on, basically, to the what you might call the more important thing. So I really enjoyed the intensity that gave us, as we're really fighting against a clock that's running down. And again, it's one that I've already enjoyed the second book in the series, and I'm hoping to enjoy further books in this 9-book series in 2025. So a surprise for me, but a very fitting position in my top 10 goes to Last Man Standing. And there we come to it. My number 1 favourite book that I read in 2024 was my first 5-star read of the year. This is Petition, book 1 of Resonance Crystal Legacy by Delilah Warren. I just love the magic in here. I thought it was really inventive. It's not really something that we haven't seen before, but I just liked the description of it. I like the way that it was all built into the world. It was so intricately kind of detailed, and it's obvious that there's been a lot of thought put into how the magic works, what the magic costs, why and when and how you would use magic. And I just thought it worked really well. I liked the characters that you had in here as well, and I did like the setting, even though parts of this story delve into kind of settings that I generally don't tend to get on with. You've got a magical school. It's kind of a combined magical battle school in many senses, but it's handled in such a different way to pretty much any of those that I've read previously, and it just worked for me really well. Surprisingly for me, this one turned into a bit of a murder mystery kind of halfway through, as we're going through our training, following a group of 4 students in this magical training facility, basically. And I thought it was unexpected. It was very well done. I loved seeing the way that these kind of novices really used their magic, despite not being very strong at it, because they are novices, used their magic to try to solve this crime and to stop further murders from happening. It was really intense, it was really exciting, very well written. The world building is absolutely fantastic. The second book has just come out. This one is called Supplicant, and it is pretty much as big as you can get for a self-published book in a single volume. I think there was a point where the author told me one more page in the page count and it would have needed to be split up into 2 books. So yeah, that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading that one as soon as I can fit it into my schedule for this year. But number 1 in my favourite books that I read 2024 goes to Delilah 1 with Petition. So there we go, those are my favourites of 2024. How much did this list surprise you? A lot? Not at all? Let me know in the comments down below. And also, what was your favourite book of 2024? That's everything I've got for you today. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon. Till then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.